Dr. Kama. Dr. Kama is on silent anyway.
Dr. Kam. He didn't share any photographs from Mehrabad.
Yes.
Okay, so Ashokji, 7 realities, and then we start with the reading.
Yes. Avatar,
Can you see my Avatar Meher Baba ki jai?
Avatar
Go
Meher
ahead.
Baba J. 7 realities: existence, love, sacrifice, renunciation, knowledge, control, and surrender. I give no importance to creed, dogma, caste, or the performance of religious ceremonies and rites, but to the understanding of the following. 1. The only real existence is that of the one and only God, who is the self in every finite self. 2. The only real love is the love for this infinity God, which arouses an intense longing to see, know, and become one with its truth, God. 3. The only real sacrifice is that in which, in pursuance of this love, all things body, mind, position, welfare, and even life itself are sacrificed. 4. The only real renunciation is that which abandons, even in the midst of worldly duties, all selfish thoughts and desires. 5. The only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in good people and in so called bad, in saint and in so called sinner. This knowledge requires you to help all equally as circumstances demand, without expectation of reward. When compelled to take part in a dispute, to act without the slightest trace of enmity or hatred, to try to make others happy with brotherly or sisterly feeling for each one, and to harm no one in thought, word, or deed, not even those who harm you. 6. The only real control is the discipline of the senses, to abstain from indulgence in low desires, which alone ensures absolute purity of character. 7. The only real surrender is that in which poise is undisturbed by any adverse circumstance, and the individual, amidst every kind of hardship, is resigned with perfect calm to the will of God. Given by Meher Baba in 1952, Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Thank you. So I think we continue with the gas state from yesterday's reading on page 40 with those of you on the physical book. But I must start by uh, again complimenting Mamaji for that 5 minute beautiful 5 minute or maybe a little longer beautiful summary that he made of the understanding and the discussion for Nirvana and Nirvikalpa Samadhi. I know he's not on the call. Uh, Incidentally, and rarely, I ran into him yesterday. So I did meet him at a common function. I said the same. So I think it's nice to see how we have all learned in this collective, collaborative learning process, and I hope all of us derive the same benefit with Baba's grace uh, to learn and learn quickly and learn from each other. So I think that's the objective. Even if we're doing it at one, two, or three people, that's a big win. On that positive and exciting note, which I am sure gives confidence to all of us, let's get started on the gas state. Anything, anything else before we start uh, on the reading? Okay, so we'll get started. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai, the gas state. The first Jivatma had to first pass through 6 major stages of mental and subtle states of fire and gas, as the chicken had to venture out 6 times before acquiring a gross form. The individual formless soul never undergoes anything in illusion. It is the Jivatma, the consciousness in a form. The Jivatma is the individual drop with bubbles, with mental, subtle, and gross bodies. And it is the one that experiences illusion, not the soul. And because of sanskaras, gross, subtle, and mental, the individual soul experiences the illusion as real. Okay, I'd like to pause here and ask one question. So I think this is an important line. The individual formless soul never undergoes anything in illusion. That we know. It is the Jivatma, the consciousness in a form. The Jivatma is the individual drop with bubbles, with mental, subtle, and gross bodies, and it is the one that experiences illusion, not the soul. So the distinction made out here is the consciousness in a form is Jivatma. So I don't know if we have heard this reference before. I was almost using Jivatma synonymously with drop soul. But then here it is very definitively brought out where Jivatma is the consciousness in a form, and in the human form, it's at the highest level, which enables it to start towards the involution journey and actually go to the end. Uh, okay, I think just bringing that out here. Anybody has any more comments on that? We can discuss.
Yeah. I just wanted to add, Karthik, maybe we have to understand that the soul is the pure, the purest form of any. But because of our impressions, we have dust, and the Jivatma also is living in basically in dust, because it's also said from dust unto dust. Means the Jivatma is emerging out of dust and it goes back to dust, because our gross body, our subtle body, and mental body, and the consciousness which develops in that is all going to go into dust. And it's a part of the illusion, because in the 7 steps of evolution, we reach that, and then 7 steps of involution, we again go back. Would that be, I mean, that's what comes to my mind.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. I'm just bringing out the subtle distinction between Jivatma and just the drop soul. So the drop soul, as you said, says all the things. I mean, all the things that you said apply perfectly to that. The Jivatma is the consciousness in the form, right? Consciousness of the form. And then it is the one that's going through illusion along with the soul. But I'm just semantically clarifying that so that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? But
Right.
yeah,
Correct.
okay, correct. Yeah.
Jai
So I'll
Baba,
continue.
the drop
Yeah, Kama,
soul
go
is
ahead.
Atma. Jivatma means embodied soul, which means the soul takes
With a form. Okay, brilliant.
the through the evolution. So actually, technically, human beings, excuse me, Manavatma. So Jivatma means embodied drop soul, which can be any of the different kingdoms. This embodied drop soul, which takes form, has consciousness because of the whim. The super consciousness, which is the Maha Chaitanya, is there when the soul doesn't have any impressions. As we know, at the end of nirvana, sanskaras become zero. So the embodied soul, the consciousness of the soul has no more sanskaras, as Ashok was saying, the dust. So we have to be very clear about the terminology. Atma means drop soul, Paramatma means over soul. And every time we read that the soul is going through this and that, subliminally we should say the consciousness of the soul. Because the consciousness of each drop soul is unique because of their unique sanskaras. So that is the reason why it is used Jivatma, which means all embodied soul in different kingdoms. And human beings are
Awesome.
defined as Manavatmas.
Manava.
And
And
Jai Baba, yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
No, I finished. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think hats off. You've been saying this earlier as well. Consciousness of the soul. I mean, whenever we use the word soul, especially with the small s, you've been saying that we have to internally note that it is consciousness of the soul. That's exactly what's being brought out here. So spot on. Thank you. Yeah. So let's continue. Each Jivatma has to pass unconsciously through two planes of fire and light. In the mental world, Brahmaloka and Shivaloka, and four planes of 276 gases in the subtle world, Suryaloka. These 276 subtle gases turn very gradually into gross gases. The 276 subtle gases are weightless and cannot be measured. This subtle gas is prana, and it turns into gross gas only after evolving through the 276 forms of subtle gases. In the 276 states of gas are contained subtle energy, prana, and infinite space, akasha. Subtle consciousness is 276 different gaseous states. Subtle energy manifests fully, that is, activates in the subtle world through infinite space. And prana, is contained in the total 276 states of gas in the four planes of the subtle world. In all these 276 states of prana, the Jivatma considers itself to be only a gas. These 276 gases are subtle and constitute infinite energy, and they fill the subtle world. A few of these last 276 gases are semi-subtle, and they exist in sub-subtle or astral plane that connects the gross world with the subtle world. Prana is what the subtle world is made of and can only be experienced in the subtle body, which is of a gaseous nature, not a physical state. There are seven major subtle gases of the 276, and they are of seven colors. But these colors are purely subtle: subtle gaseous blue, subtle gaseous purple, subtle gaseous indigo, subtle gaseous, no, gaseous green, gaseous orange, gaseous yellow, and gaseous red. The seven gross colors of matter are shadows of the subtle gaseous colors. So now we know where we get the colors from. So that's about the gases, the prana, and then we go to the first adventure. Please feel free to stop me if there's something that we need to further discuss. In the subtle world, energy activates matter, which is in subtle form, akasha, infinite space, and matter is forced to manifest fully. This action creates the gross world, and this sphere is the full manifestation of matter activated by the energy of the subtle world, prana. Matter manifests first in the form of gross gas, and the 277th state of subtle gas is the gross gas hydrogen. After hydrogen, evolve the other gross gases made up of gross molecules and atoms. First evolves the proton, then the electron, and with the electron, an atom is formed. After so many atoms consolidate, that is the dust of the gross, the state of stone originates. it requires approximately 10 million sanskaras to form one atom, and approximately 10 million atoms to form dust, a particle of stone. It takes aeons and aeons, about 1.4 million years, for the Jivatma to complete its journey into the gross world, first passing unconsciously through the mental and subtle states of fire and gases, 700,000 years in each one, and after which it assumes the stone form. The first adventure of this Jivatma begins as consciousness begins to develop the gross world. The first adventure of the Jivatma begins as consciousness begins to develop in the gross world with the advent of stone. This is when the drop bubble, becoming one in consciousness with the stone form, thinks itself to be stone. So another important point being made here is the consciousness is born only with the creation of the stone, which itself is gas becoming subatomic, gas is at subatomic particles, then atomic particles, and then the first speck of dust. Dust is smallest representation or manifestation heading towards the state of stone. I continue. The drop soul has no form. Only the bubble enveloping it has form. But the drop identifies itself with the bubble. The original whim of the oversoul created the question, who am I? To know itself, the soul to know itself as God, but because of the nothing, the formless soul thinks that it is what it is not. The stone has a soul, everything, because the oversoul is omnipresent and infinitely indivisible. But the soul has a bubble around it of nothing. Stone, made up of mind, energy, and matter in the gross world. The drop bubble is called the Jivatma. This term, Jivatma, has also been called the psyche, the principle of life in man, and the creation of the psyche is from nothing. Thus, both the everything drop and the nothing bubble simultaneously exist in the expansion of consciousness during evolution. Although this expanding mess is an imagination, it is the medium for the total development of consciousness, whereby the soul becomes aware of its omniscience. The Jivatma, in stone form, has gross, subtle, and mental bodies, but the subtle and mental bodies are undeveloped. And because the stone lies in undeveloped form, it is lifeless and without individual consciousness. The form of stone contains infinitely finite gross sanskaras, and after experiencing one type of stone, the consciousness of the Jivatma snaps its connection with it. Then, disembodied, the Jivatma is without form for some time due to the shock created by the disconnection. The Jivatma's consciousness is then focused on those infinitely finite gross sanskaras that made it one with the previous stone form. To use up, that is to spend, these sanskaras, the Jivatma now must experience the opposite type of sanskaras. To spend sanskaras means to create opposite type of sanskaras. In doing so, new sanskaras are created, consolidated to use up these new sanskaras. The individual consciousness must undergo another form. In this transmigratory way, through the experience of opposites, new forms or new species are derived from the sanskaras gathered by the old forms, and the manyness of creation unfolds. Consciousness of the Jivatma develops gradually as new sanskaras are created by experience of one stone form, and must be counteracted by experiencing another stone form, which in turn creates new sanskaras. This counteraction is the meaning of transmigratory evolution. In transmigration, the consciousness of the Jivatma never takes the same form of species twice, but only once. After cycles and cycles, and after experiencing diverse forms dependent on infinitely opposite types of sanskaras, the individual consciousness snaps its connection with the stone form and is formless for some time because of the shock of disconnecting with its body. The consciousness of the Jivatma now concentrates on the collected sanskaras of the last stone form, and in order to spend these collected sanskaras, the Jivatma becomes one with the first form of metal. The first metal form is taken according to the sanskaras created, that is molded by the last stone form. As with stone, so with metal. Jivatma spends ages and ages of time experiencing the diverse metal forms. Since the Jivatma has undeveloped subtle and mental bodies as stone and metal, energy and mind remain latent in these forms. Consequently, stones and metals have no physical limbs and are incapable of movement except through magnetism. Movement must be understood as individual and voluntary. Stones and metals lie inert, possessing only extremely rudimentary gross consciousness. Okay, so gas moving to stone and the early stages of metal. I pause again to see if there's any points that people would like to make. Okay, I have a quiz question. So, what is everything and what is nothing among drop and bubble? Which is everything and which is nothing? Drop and bubble.
Hi, drop is everything
Yeah.
and the bubble is nothing.
Perfect. Perfect. So I think that again was a very good distinction that I picked from the last para, right? The drop is the everything, but the clouding of the sanskaras creates the bubble, which is nothing, which is the nothing, right? So perfect. So yeah, let's continue with the second adventure. After experiencing the last form of metal, the Jivatma's consciousness is centered on the accumulated sanskaras of the last metal form. To spend these very last accumulated sanskaras, the Jivatma becomes one with the first form of vegetation and identifies itself as vegetable, a plant. There are different species and varieties of vegetable form, including the family type, because consciousness stores up the sanskaras of each form of vegetable it experiences. and spends them by creating a form with the reverse type of sanskaras. In this way, through active reversion, the gross consciousness of the soul continues developing, but side by side, it also carries the load of infinitely finite sanskaras from previous forms. In vegetable form, the subtle body begins to develop, enabling the consciousness in plant form to utilize energy. Vegetable form is therefore half inert and half sentient. This utilization of energy is called Chaitanya. In most plant forms, there exists no automatic movement, voluntary motion, and the plant depends on water, air, and soil to stand erect. This erect stance is the first development of vertebrate. The fruit, flower, nut, etc., represent the first semblance of a brain that reflects outer physical expression. The tree form corresponds to that of a man, but it is positioned upside down in the earth. The tree's head, brain, is buried underground, roots being the hair, while the body, torso, is the trunk of the tree, and its limbs, legs, and arms are the branches. The exception is the date palm tree. Its head is above ground level. The subtle body begins to develop in the vegetable form. Jivatmas in this form utilize energy by breathing, taking in water, and feeding from the soil. This utilization of energy also manifests as sex without physical union, called Purva Sang. However, there is no development of the mental body in any plant form. Therefore, plants cannot think. It takes cycles and cycles for the consciousness to pass through various vegetable forms until a time finally comes when the consciousness breaks off its connection with this kingdom after 84 lakh plant forms, and the Jivatma is without form for some time. With that, we end the second adventure. The key thing for plant is the introduction of the subtle access to the subtle form, subtle body. So the plants have subtle bodies, and they start using energy in the rudimentary form. And I think even in God Speaks, there is a reference to how all forms are actually a representation of the human form. So I think if I recollect correctly, the stone is the human form in sleeping position, and now we are told that the plant is basically an upside down representation of the human form, with the roots representing the brain. Right. So that's the second adventure of the vegetable form. Any thoughts? Any questions? No. So let's continue. The third adventure. Consciousness of the Jivatma remains fixed on the accumulated sanskaras of the last vegetable form. To dispose of these sanskaras, the Jivatma's consciousness becomes one with the first form of worm. Development of the mental body of the embodied soul begins in the worm form. As the worm crawls about in search of food, worms, insects, amphibians, and reptiles represent the most primary state of mental development. Life of automatic movement begins with the worm crawling, and the Jivatma uses the mind in a most rudimentary way to hunt and find food, to protect itself. Instinct of self-preservation begins. To procreate, physical sex begins, and it experiences pain and pleasure in finite degrees. There are innumerable species of worms, insects, and reptiles. It takes the soul ages and ages to experience all the necessary 8.4 million forms by continually accumulating and exhausting sanskaras. Filially, the Jivatma disconnects, maybe it's just finally, I don't know. Filially, the Jivatma disconnects itself from the last worm form, the snake, and remains formless for a time. Whatever form the Jivatma assumes, it identifies itself with that particular form. After snapping connection with that creature body, the Jivatma always experiences that it was not that form, and this experience disconnects it from the form. In this way, illusory consciousness develops throughout evolution in the gross universe of millions of planets inhabited by different evolving forms. After passing through the fire and light in the mental world and through the 276 states of gas in the subtle world, unconsciously, the consciousness of the individual soul develops through stone and metal forms, through the half inert and half sentient plant forms, to the primary consciousness of worm. As the consciousness came to know that it was not fire, not gas, not stone, or metal, or plant, so also it comes to realize that it is not a worm. But then, what is it? To know this, its adventures continue. So, what do we see as representation of third adventure? Third adventure, we see the first clear movement, the first clear idea of instinct and self-preservation, and also of procreation. And if we recollect, even in God Speaks, this is covered well. So with that, we go to the fourth adventure. Uh, Again, a pause to check if anybody has anything to say or any questions that you want to discuss. Okay. After the Jivatma's separation and disconnection from the last worm form, the consciousness of the soul focuses on the accumulated sanskaras of that form. To spend them, it takes the first form of fish. The Jivatma identifies itself with fish now, and instead of surviving on earth, it lives in water. After passing through numberless forms of different species, 8.4 million types of fish, the consciousness of the Jivatma breaks off its connection with the last fish form. It centers its concentration on the accumulated sanskaras of that form, knowing that it was not fish in any of the forms it passed through. But then, what is it? To know this, the Jivatma's experience must increase. So it ventures on and makes a great leap into the air. The fifth adventure. The Jivatma's consciousness experiences itself as the first form of bird. in order to use up the sanskaras accumulated in the last fish form. This may explain why the first bird form is a waterfowl. The bird kingdom is splendid in its variety and contains numberless kinds of species which live on earth and water and fly in the skies. The individual consciousness has to pass through. Give me a second, please. The individual consciousness has to pass through. The individual consciousness has to pass through 8.4 million forms of birds over an immeasurable length of time. Finally, the Jivatma reaches the last bird form, the rooster, and disconnects from it, knowing that it is not a bird. But because the consciousness focuses on the accumulated sanskaras of the last bird form, the individual consciousness is still of illusion, necessitating its further expansion. To evolve in form means the consciousness expands outwardly. Thus, the soul, to expand its consciousness, creates the universe. Okay. Quiz. What's the last worm form? Last verb form is snake. What's the first bird form? It starts from the fish and then goes to the bird. So, waterfowl. And the last bird form is anybody? Just read it.
Rooster.
Yeah, it's the rooster. And maybe the rooster. I mean, there must be a significance for this. I'm not able to figure out what that is. On what are these last forms? And this is where I think there's a beautiful mural that maybe Ashok and some of you have seen in the
Yeah.
Walnut Creek Center. Yeah, the Walnut Creek Center.
Oh,
The same mural is now in Bairamangala, which I think happened after the Dhars visited. The Dhars visited when the mural was not there. Mural got put up, I think, in 19. The same mural that's in Walnut Creek, California. And this actually has the divine theme in visual form and very, very beautiful detail, with each of these forms, which are the transient or marker forms between kingdoms, beautifully created. And it's been put up in Bairamangala as well. So that's something to keep in mind when you guys are here. So with that, let's get to the sixth adventure. The
Hi,
Jivatma
so
experience. Yeah, go ahead, Soma.
yes, is rooster the last one?
Yes, rooster is the last form. Last
Okay,
bird
thank
form
you.
is rooster. The first bird form is
Waterfall.
waterfall. Waterfall.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sixth adventure. The Jivatma experiences the first form of animal, usually a kangaroo, in order to spend the samskaras accumulated during the last bird form. The individual has to pass through different varieties of animal forms because each form exhausts old sanskaras and accumulates new animal impressions. At times, identifying itself with cat, the Jivatma mews and claws. At times, it thinks it is a dog instead and barks and bites. As a cow, it moves, and as a lion, it roars fiercely. So, the consciousness of the embodied soul experiences 8.4 million forms of animal species, and depending on the sanskaras of each particular form, it takes these beastly forms accordingly. The Jivatma identifies itself with every form from stone to animal because of the sanskaras of this illusory consciousness, and it creates the universe to expand this individual consciousness. All the evolving development up to this point, animals, has been the development of individual gross consciousness. Naturally, the gross body has been evolving along with the gross consciousness, but it is three bodies that are developing through evolution, not one. The subtle body began to develop from the vegetable kingdom through the utilization of energy. The mental body, the mind, mana, began to develop from the worm form through the utilization of instinct. This is evolving individual gross consciousness. The subtle and mental bodies simultaneously are developing through evolution so that eventually, in human form, the individual will experience the subtle and mental planes consciously and fully as a normal man enjoys the world. Since the development of the subtle and mental bodies is only partially complete in the animal form, energy and mind are not fully utilized as an animal. An animal has no thinking power, though natural instinct is fully awakened in every species. Yet, it seems that animals have the capacity to know and understand, but they cannot. The consciousness of the poor Jivatma takes millions and millions of years to pass through and gain experience of all the species of the animal kingdom, until at last it reaches the stage of the ape, monkeys. The ape breaks off its connections with the world of animals. However, the attention of the soul is still concentrated on the accumulated sanskaras of the last animal form and is in the grip of those sanskaras, even though for the time being it is without a form. Consequently, the Jivatma remains entrapped in limitations. The seventh adventure. Now, the consciousness of the Jivatma enters the very first human form, and that is male or female eunuch, the result of the accumulated sanskaras of the very last animal form, usually an ape. Only in the human form is there a full development of the subtle and mental bodies. However, because of the gross animal sanskaras experienced by the individual consciousness, the human Jivatma is only conscious of the gross world, although completely unaware of the subtle and mental worlds. The Jivatma, nevertheless, uses different aspects of these two higher worlds through the medium of the gross. But the utilization is indirect. Energy is an aspect of the subtle world. Utilization in the gross world of the atom for nuclear energy and the sun's rays for solar energy is indirect. because one cannot fully utilize or control that energy and does not embody it as a person on the subtle planes does. Thoughts, emotions, longings, feelings, and desires are aspects of the mental world, but a gross conscious human uses thoughts, feelings, desires indirectly, that is, in action, whereas a mental conscious human can experience the seed of a thought, and that is direct use. The mental body's development most readily expresses itself in gross conscious humans as intellect or reason. And there are 18,000 planets in the universe inhabited by humans with great intellectual capacity but little heart, that is love. It is only on earth that human beings have a balance of heart and mind, love and knowledge, passion and intellect, spirituality and science. To achieve the height of evolution, the human form, the Jivatma, had to pass through many evolving forms and species, approximately 50,400,000, to develop fully the subtle and mental bodies during millions of cycles and cycles of time, yugas. In spite of everything, the whole phenomena of creation remains a dream. As the soul, the one ocean is all existing, ever there, never changing, never coming, never going, ever one, and never doing anything. Throughout all creation, the ocean of soul remains as it is, eternal, indivisible, formless, and infinite. There is only one ocean, but within that ocean, there is also its shadow. The ocean of truth is the ocean of everything, and its shadow is the ocean of nothing. When the whim arose, who am I? The ocean of everything thought, and the thought formed a bubble. Because of the bubble of thinking, the ocean thought it became a drop, Jivatma. Every embodied soul has in it a drop of everything and a drop of nothing. Thus, the ocean of everything becomes a drop of everything, and the ocean of nothing becomes a drop of nothing. The embodied soul, Jivatma, begins the journey to experience the ocean of everything through the seven stages of nothing, becoming everything in the process of evolution. From the vegetable forms onward in evolution, the two drops of everything and nothing are attracted, opposites attracted to each other, and because of this attraction, evolution is propelled. In human form, the body of mind and the body of energy are fully developed and consciousness is complete. Therefore, these two drops of everything and nothing should unite in the first human form, and the embodied soul should experience the ocean of everything. But this does not happen, despite the fact that the capacity exists in the human form for everything and nothing to become one. The sanskaras carried by the Jivatma from previous animal forms must be spent in order to unite the two drops. I have one question. So, from the vegetable forms onward in evolution, the two drops of everything and nothing are attracted. So, I mean, is there a reason why it is only from the vegetable form? Anybody? I can understand the attraction of the two drops between nothing and everything, but I'm just curious about what why it is only from the vegetable form.
Because Baba likes vegetarian people.
Anybody else?
Can you rephrase the question
Baba
again,
likes
please? Can
everybody.
you repeat the question?
Yeah. So from the vegetable form onwards in evolution, the two drops of everything and nothing are attracted, opposites attracted to each other. So is it the minimum development of consciousness that's required, or is it also the existence of the subtle body for vegetable forms? Those are the two distinctions that we see in the change of kingdoms, right? So maybe that's what it is, but I'm just thinking, is there a reason why the drops of everything and nothing are attracted from the vegetable form stage onwards? Kama, your audio is not coming through.
Jai Baba, can you repeat the question? I know it's Mehrabad, so network is. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. So if you read the line that I'm highlighting now, that from the vegetable forms onward in evolution, the two drops of everything and nothing are attracted, opposites attracted to each other, and because of this attraction, evolution is propelled. My question is, why is it this attraction starts only from the vegetable form upwards?
Okay, I think the difference between the stone form and the plant form is animate and inanimate and animate. Stone is inanimate, it can't procreate, whereas plants reproduce. So the divine theme is such that, as you know, through pollination, you actually replicate yourself. And of course, in the animal kingdom, you have male and female animals, and they get sexually attracted. That is where even human sexual attraction comes from. So it is basically the difference between a stone and a plant or animal is being an inanimate and animate, whether it can reproduce. So for reproduction purposes, you have this form of attraction. I don't know whether I answered your question. Jai Baba.
I'm not sure too, because I did not think of the attraction between the drops of everything and nothing to be taken to be in that sense. But let me reflect
Yeah,
on
it
that, and
is
maybe we
because
can.
the
Okay.
because the consciousness look, the consciousness degree of consciousness is higher in a plant compared to a stone, and again animal.
Accepted.
If you read reincarnation and karma before the, I
Discourses.
think part 3 or part 4, it's clearly explained about these aspects that you're just reading about. If you want, have a look at it. I think it's chapter part 3 or part 4. It's clearly explained this transition, why attraction happens. See, the love attraction is also inclusive of the fundamental forces, gravitational force and so on.
Love
So
is
all these
magnetism.
yes, all the fundamental forces of attraction and repulsion are a form of love. Only thing is they are the lowest forms of love, or what you call as rudimentary forms of love. And lust is the lowest form of love in human beings. Then you go through longing in subtle body, then surrender in the mental body, and union in the seventh plane. That is how the progression of love is. As soon as the Big Bang starts, love is the essence of everything. The universe came out of love. So these are all different degrees of love. And I think it is the degree of consciousness of that particular form will determine what kind of degrees of love it will experience. Jai Baba.
Great. That's useful. Thank you very much. And I continue, maybe I'll continue from that end of the line. In human form, the body of mind and the body of energy are fully developed and consciousness is complete. Therefore, these two drops of everything and nothing should unite in the first human form, and the embodied soul should experience the ocean of everything. But this does not happen, despite the fact that the capacity exists in the human form for everything and nothing to become one. The sanskaras carried by the Jivatma from previous animal forms must be spent in order to unite the two drops. Therefore, the human consciousness remains burdened with the sanskaras of animals, and since further evolution of consciousness is not required, reincarnation then begins. Had it not been burdened with animal sanskaras, the Jivatma would naturally have entered the first subtle plane on achieving human form. But throughout the process of reincarnation, the two drops remain divided until the human consciousness enters the first subtle plane and the process of the union of the two drops begins. The uniting of the two drops of everything and nothing through spheres of energy and mind is involution, which brings about the experience of shadow as shadow and realizing substance as substance. Once infinite shadow is experienced, infinite substance arises as the ocean of everything. Then nothing is really nothing, and everything is really everything. The seven adventures of consciousness, individual and collective, from stone to man, are external adventures, that is, expansion for the experience of gross conscious development. The seventh adventure in human form is reincarnation, and it does not end until the sanskaras of gross consciousness are completely annihilated from the mind. This annihilation takes time as the Jivatma is caught in cycles of reincarnation for ages and ages, experiencing inevitably 8.4 million human lifetimes. Again, a question. So, is the inevitability, even though you make progress in involution through Viveka and Vairagya and make it and try to fast track it? So, the inevitability of union is for those who go through 8.4. But then, is there an inevitability of having to go through 8.4?
Yes, basically, as long as you are spending sanskaras more than you are unwinding sanskaras. But I think from a technical point of view, by 8.4 million times, the Jivatma would have experienced every possible good or bad experience, and you become neutralized to zero. This is just a conjecture from my point. That, of course, there can be infinite experiences, but for any unique individual, these experiences would be such that they kind of at the end finally closes by itself. That is how the divine theme. Otherwise, why would they use the number 84 lakh lifetimes? Jai Baba.
No. So I don't question that the possibility of exhausting all the infinite possibilities in 8.4 is taken. I'm only questioning the use of the word inevitably, right? So is the inevitability on the occurrence of these 8.4 lifetimes, 8.4 million lifetimes, or is that just the mathematical limit? Is my question.
Karthik?
Yes, it's a mathematical limit because, if you don't think about a guru to guide you in your spiritual progress, then you just go according to your soul.
Go through it all.
The point
Yeah.
here is, the point is, even if you go according to your whim and don't follow any teacher, the 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 soul, the consciousness of the soul will exhaust all its sanskaras by the
After
time,
it.
by this limited cycle. Yes, absolutely. The reason we are
Yeah.
affiliated with a teacher is to reduce the number of human cycles and get off from the wheel of samsara. That is how Buddha has pointed out. And Baba, through the path of love, wants us to, experience bliss without having to go through 8.84 lakh lifetimes. Jai Baba.
Exactly. So that's the point I'm making. So it's both a motivation, given that we have the master. The second is also to say that if you're not motivated, well, it's 8.4. Deal with it, right? So that's why I wanted to ask about the inevitability. Ashok, you were saying something.
Yeah, I'm saying if you go to the My Wish, the last, diktat, that's point 6. It's Baba says that if you if you remember, whosoever remembers my name at the time of breathing his last comes to me. So I also agree or concur with what Rama said, that 84 lakh is a mathematical limit, or it's the maximum number of reincarnations. But if you are on the path, and if you and remember to remember Baba's name at the breathing last, then that can be reduced. Is my inference. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
Agreed. I
other
just
analogy you can
what
use is that every human being can do a PhD. Let's say PhD is equivalent to getting moksha or mukti. But not everyone goes for a PhD. They are fine with whatever they have. So you can say that all the human beings who are born, they just go through birth, school, work, and death. Some people get a PhD in the material world, some don't, but the end result is the same. So in that sense, so a human being who is not interested in liberation will get liberated automatically in 84 lakh lifetimes. That is the point. Okay, Bob.
So there is a fast track.
yeah, there is a fast track, but then it also brings out one more point. In the other kingdoms, probably there is no fast track because the consciousness is not developed to the level of the human form, and so you just have to go through it in the same word that's used here, inevitably. So the inevitability of that is unavoidable till the point you reach the human form. Human form is where the shortcuts appear.
Jai Baba.
I was expecting an input from Nomita at this point.
What incarnation do you think we are at? 800? Which one? If we have gone
Honestly, I
straight,
don't care.
no, you better care because you have a long way to go.
MOM. MOM. That's it.
My?
So, no, minimum ordinary mukti.
Oh, yeah, me too. Then we'll be
That's it. I don't care.
classmates.
Sure. So I could be in my 100th, I could be in my 100,000th, or I could be in my 8.399,999th. I'm okay. But MOM. Okay.
Thank you, Jai Baba.
And by the way, I'm vegetarian.
Oh, that's not good. There is a shortcut lane for non-vegetarians.
Karthik, can you repeat the font? The words are going outside the frame sometimes.
Yeah, I'll do that. Very, very rarely, and I've been scrolling to ensure. I'm not on my monitor, but I'm on my laptop. Yeah.
It's good now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's only words, and words is all I have to take your heart away.
Oh my
Happy
God.
Valentine's Day.
Valentine. Oh my, I knew this. Nobita has to. Okay.
Jay Baba,
Yeah.
I think
We
the
have
question
the
here
real
is,
Valentine. Valentine. Yeah, go ahead.
Jay Baba, the question here is that does the Jivatma, the embodied soul, drop soul, needs to take a human form to attain salvation or liberation? Yes, almost every every drop soul has to take a human form to attain liberation. But there are very, very, very rare cases where, based on the Sadguru, animal can get liberation. And I've said this before. Ramana Maharshi gave
Ramana
Lakshmi
Maharshi.
the cow. Okay, and if you read the God speaks, there are two parts. One is the first part, and the second part is the supplement. Between the two parts, there is a two-pager which clearly tells you about how you don't have to go through involution. If at the flick of a finger, one can actually get salvation even with the first human form or even before the human form that is dependent on the Sadguru. So that is a page that one should read now if you think it's appropriate. Yeah, Baba. Because it talks about the 84 lakh human cycles also. There are two pages after the end of the evolution of consciousness.
Okay. So
Yeah,
before
Baba.
we go to reincarnation, we'll read those two pages. Good idea. I continue, and after that, 8.4 human lives. All through these millions of human births and deaths, the human being is clutched in the dream of nothing, in the clutches of lust, in greed's grip of wealth, in selfish egoism, in anger's wars, in hatred's cruelty, in pride's vanity, and jealousy's poisonous envy. These desires pervade the gross conscious man or woman's world, and they fill their gross consciousness with the dreams of power, romance, conquest, killing, glory, and greatness. When does man or woman awaken from all this dreaming? Okay.
Jai Baba, I think you can look at the 7 deadly sins out here: lust, greed, selfish
Lust, anger,
anger,
greed, HPSJ.
hatred, pride, and jealousy. So, of course, it's different from the one I use: infatuation, lust, greed, anger, jealousy, fear, and worry. But they all mean the same thing anyway because it affects the ego. Jai Baba.
And the one you use is from discourses, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Correct. So this one
Baba
has another
clearly,
list, and it is 7. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Tamash.
yeah. I think it's based on context, I believe, probably. So in the chapter of love, Baba has clearly demarcated the 5: infatuation, lust, greed, anger, jealousy.
Lust.
We know that LGA, lust, greed, anger, deals with gross, subtle, and mental bodies. So we also know Baba has talked about worry. So that is also mentioned in love. And then fear, that is my own interpretation. So one can add whatever suits one's, So, Jai Baba.
But then here the number 7 is connected to the 7 desires. That's the 7 types of desires. And then yesterday we were thinking of the acronym
Right.
LAGHPSJ. So we'll probably keep this in mind as well. But taste, context is everything, like we have learned in the various Baba literature. So with this, let me try to fish out the supplement you're talking about. So you're saying it's before before 10 states of God, or Kama?
I think it is, yes, before the 10 states of God. Yes.
So the part 8, which is the beyond state of God, the first urge and the cycle of evolution, involution of consciousness. Is that the one? No, that's much longer. Or maybe it's the sevenfold veil, which is part 7. Let me go to part 7 and see if that's what it is.
Page 158 or 156?
150.
No, not this. Try
this?
page
Okay.
157, 158. 157, 158 page.
You're without your physical book,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes. At this page, 154, I think.
Yeah, 154.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, this
okay.
one. Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
it. Perfect. Kama, you're a genius. So this is not a chapter. Basically, it's Meher Baba's explanation of chart 7 facing this page. Okay, let's read this. Those of you on the physical book, it's 154. Okay, 154. God speaks. With the energy from the subtle and the illumination from the mental spheres, for trillions upon trillions of years in the past and in the future, the gross universe has been and will be forming and disintegrating into countless stars, suns, planets, worlds, moons, and meteors. Yet, in fact, there are no such things as time and space. Once the soul is freed of illusion, illusion does not merely cease to exist, but is then found never to have existed at all. After a gradual evolution through the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms of the gross universe for a definite yet immeasurable period of millions, billions, and trillions of years, consciousness reaches perfection in man. Man then rightly ought to be God conscious, but does not become so because of the sanskaric bindings born of impressions of the illusory experiences gathered during the evolution of consciousness. Thus, man remains fully conscious only of the gross. Before man's perfect but gross consciousness can evolve into the reality of God consciousness, it has first to evolve into subtle consciousness and from the subtle into full mental consciousness. For that, the gross impressions have to turn into the subtle, and from the subtle into the mental impressions, regaining in degree the faintness and fineness of earlier impressions as gathered in the vegetable and mineral forms. The fundamental difference being in consciousness. Unlike the definite course followed in the process of evolution, man as man can make use of his consciousness fully and freely. Therefore, the fully gross conscious man, according to the resultant tightening or loosening of his sanskaric bindings, can become fully subtle conscious and thereafter fully mental conscious, sometimes after a few or sometimes after numerous human incarnations, between each of the two involutions of his consciousness. And if one happens to be blessed with divine love from a lover of God, or if one has the guiding hand of a perfect master, the emancipation from all bindings, however great and complicated they may be, is achieved much more easily and quickly. In exceptional cases, an instantaneous emancipation is also possible without involving a single reincarnation. Here. However,
Can
in
you
order to
repeat?
do
Can you
so,
repeat the paragraph? Can you repeat the paragraph again?
sure,
Because it's very important. Yeah.
unlike the definite course followed in the process of evolution, man as man can make use of his consciousness fully and freely. Therefore, the fully gross conscious man, according to the resultant tightening or loosening of his sanskaric bindings, can become fully subtle conscious and thereafter fully mental conscious, sometimes after a few or sometimes after numerous human reincarnations, between each of the two involutions of his consciousness. And if one happens to be blessed with divine love from a lover of God, or if one has the guiding hand of a perfect master, the emancipation from all bindings, however great and complicated they may be, is achieved much more easily and quickly. In exceptional cases, an instantaneous emancipation is also possible without involving a single reincarnation. So I think this is exactly what Kama was referring to. And this, if this can't motivate, I don't know what can. So it's a good motivation. I continue.
What kind of
However,
exceptional circumstances?
what is that?
What kind of exceptional cases are there? What do we need to do to be an exception?
So I think it is your sanskaric makeup, and there are hints, right? Love for God, fear of God. These are all things that help you get to a fast track. But it is only grace and probably things that you've done in your animal and the early human forms that will help you do that.
Karthik, I have a
Actually,
question.
I'm
100% complete
Kama.
surrender with the divine grace of the perfect master. It's 100% complete surrender, which can only happen with the grace of a perfect master. So that can be an example of an exceptional case. Now, why did the cow Lakshmi have that? Because it also tells you that animals have emotions. And the way it responded to Ramana Maharshi, I mean, you got to read it. I won't be able to explain that. But only by example, one can, talk about case studies, like this. Jai Baba.
So complete surrender mentioned, right? And what was the other one? Complete surrender and something love for God.
Grace of the perfect master.
वो तो
Grace.
हमारे हाथ में नहीं है ना. Grace तो उनके हाथ में है. हमें क्या करना है?
No, but it goes hand in hand. The more you surrender, the more possibility the
More
grace
grace
happens.
you welcome.
Right.
Yes, it
Okay.
goes hand in hand. So you can't wait for grace. It has to happen by itself. But grace will only happen if we go through that longing and surrender
Grace happens. I
process.
completely agree. It's hand in hand, and it's happening as we speak. So, हमारे को क्या करना है? That's what I wanted to know. All right, Jai Baba. Thank you.
100% surrender, Sunil. 100% surrender.
Yes, 100% is difficult, but we try. Keep trying. Yeah. Thank you, Jai Baba.
Yeah.
I have
Surrender to 100% to the people around you. 100%.
Nomita wants me to surrender to her first before surrendering to Baba. ठीक है.
अरे
Baba,
यार,
Nomita.
take the hint यार. Valentine's Day आ रहा है. Gift
अरे
का
गलती हो
हुआ
गई.
कि नहीं? Chaliye, I continue. However, in order to loosen the bindings through the opposite experiences of the duality of illusion, that is pain and pleasure, good and bad, man and woman, strong and weak, etc., on his own, man has to remain conscious of multifarious experiences for 84 lakhs of times through something like 50 crores of sleeps of death. Yet, invariably, on account of the all pervading grace of God, man becomes subtle and mental conscious and is thus able to cut short more or less the stalemate of recurring physical births and deaths. Finally, by the grace of the God man or the man God, in far less than an instant's flash of time, man becomes fully conscious God and finds that time and space are born of his own eternity and infinitude, in which time and space have no existence at all. So we exactly read this in the last paragraph, right? We understood that time and space are a construct of imagination, and it didn't even exist at all when you get to the point of union. Anyway, there is a footnote which I will read. Asked for further clarification, Eruch B. Jesawala wrote in reply, the reference to 50 crores of sleeps of death is approximately what one soul has to undergo through the processes of evolution of consciousness of forms and of reincarnation with the help of changes in the media, that is, association with and dissociation from different forms of different species. 84 lakhs of shakings or reincarnations are in human form, but 50 crores of sleeps of death include pre-human forms, associations with and disassociations from media and the experiences of their impressions. Man need not die more times than he can be born. Man is born once with the birth of mind, and man dies once with the annihilation of mind. As such, there is indeed no reincarnation. It is just a process of crores of sleeps of death for the mind that is born once and that dies once. Birth of mind involves the processes of evolution, reincarnation, and involution. Death of mind is realization of the self. Beautiful. Very, very beautiful. And I think very, very appropriate reference to read. Thank you so much, Kama, and I'm glad we jumped to this. So if you look at, there's also a number, right? Where was the 50 crore number? Did it appear here as well? Didn't we read a 50 crore type number in Nothing and Everything? Not really. Okay, so anyway, I think any questions, any thoughts? Again, exciting day of reading. I loved today's read.
Yes. There's a mention about lover of God. So what do you mean by that? I mean, how do you find one from who you can get blessed with divine love from a lover of God on page one?
Lover of God.
So what does that mean?
It can be a fifth plane or sixth plane, but ideally it should be a God realized being or Shivatma.
Okay.
And
Someone way ahead on your
Karthik,
path.
can you go down to the subscript?
Yeah.
Karthik, when you go down to that subscript, you read the 3 about Eric Joseph.
Yeah.
Here, it's interesting that there are 2 definitions on birth and death. The last two lines says, birth of mind involves the process of evolution, reincarnation, and involution, and death of mind is realization of the self, which means manonash, or nirvana plus nirvikalpa samadhi, because realization of the self. Death of mind is basically manonash, because mind is sanskaras. Then he talks about man is born once and with the birth of mind. So here birth of mind involves the process of involution, reincarnation, and evolution, and man dies once with the annihilation of mind, which is the manonash. So the last line says death of mind is realization of the soul. Annihilation of mind is the first stage of real fana, and the second stage of real fana is nirvikalpa samadhi, or realization of the self, self-realization. Just a pointer, nothing else. Jai Baba.
Yeah,
No,
Kama,
no, it's a
I just wanted to add what I learned in this process is that I think page 238 and 239, supplement 19 and supplement 20, the real birth and real
real
death,
birth.
and fana and fanafila. It's anyway, it's all same things, but it's been again explained very beautifully on supplement 19 and supplement 20. You can look it up later on maybe, but this is also a good correlation. Jai Baba.
Indeed. So, as I said, great read, great interaction, and I hope great learning and unraveling for all of us. Let's stop at this point and continue in the next weekend. Who's doing the Lord Meher readings in the morning this week? Is it Mamaji? Did he confirm?
I didn't hear confirmation, but I think I briefly pointed towards him, but I'm not sure if
Yeah.
it's confirmed.
Yeah, exactly what I remember too. I didn't see him confirming, so let me ping him offline and get his um, confirmation. And I think whether he's comfortable sharing and sharing the screen and all of that, I'll figure that out. I'll figure that out and post to you guys. I am not going to be opening the calls and doing the recording because I'm I'm in Dubai and then it's too early for me. So I've requested Nandini to do it. She has access and don't
Jai
laugh.
Baba, that's a good one.
What do you mean? So she's
Welcome,
going to
Nandini.
be so she's going to be opening the calls. So guys, behave. Be in your best behavior.
Baba is in control. Don't worry.
Jai Baba.
So I've set up and she's on the calendar, and I've also added. I put a reminder and stuff. Days I can, I will jump in. All right.
Great. Hey, Kama, when are you passing? When are you returning from Mehrabad?
Tonight.
Oh, tonight.
Tonight.
Today. And back to Bombay or where?
Yeah, Bombay, yeah.
And tonight via Pune or you're going straight?
There's a direct train from Shirdi to Bombay, which goes via down Pune.
I see. I'm flying to Pune for work tonight. I thought I could
Oh,
just...
wonderful. I would... you're going via Bombay or you're coming direct?
No, drop your train ticket and go and meet him. And
yeah.
Then, anyway, you're the itinerant monk, right? So your plans are never certain. So go to Pune and meet
Sunil, how long are you in Pune?
I'm on a business trip for 4 days.
I'm planning to be in Pune on Friday.
Oh no, Thursday night I will fly back. And there's somebody with me. So
So let me see.
yes. Yeah. You can, if you want to stay with me, bunk in with me tonight. We can talk about Baba. I think I
Hello.
have to tell somebody
Hey,
else.
you guys are making me jealous now.
Okay, Sunil, what you can
Yeah.
do is you give me a call after you reach Pune, and I will see if
All
I
right.
can come on Thursday or something.
All right. Okay.
Because I have some work in Pune, and I was supposed to be there on Friday, leave on Saturday.
Oh,
But
then
depending on
come
the
on
person,
Wednesday night. Come on Wednesday night. Stay with me overnight. Thursday evening is my flight, 5 p.m. So evenings is probably the best time we can talk. Daytime, I might be busy.
Okay,
Schedule is made by somebody else.
Wednesday,
So it's not my. Yeah.
ठीक है, ठीक है. Wednesday evening. Okay, I'll remember that.
Try. Yeah. Okay.
Will do.
Jai Baba.
Great.
Yeah.
Jai Baba,
On
Jai
that
Baba.
jealous note, we'll wrap up for
Jai
today.
Baba.
And, and
Jai Baba.
hi, Sanjay, Jai Baba.
Yeah,
Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba.
Jai Baba.
By the
everyone.
way, Sanjay, if you're interested to make a trip to Mehrabad, we are trying to get a meeting done on during the birthday. So 25th, we are all
Okay.
going to be there. So try to make a trip
Okay.
if you can.
So,
Okay.
Right?
And
I made reservations at MPR. So, but you are welcome to do a day trip, or you can also
okay.
send an email and ask for reservation. But it'd be nice
Yeah.
if you can come.
Yeah.
Uh,
I got an opportunity to be at Meher Dham, Dehradun,
Me too.
this Thursday.
Oh,
Thursday,
okay.
Dehradun.
Okay.
I went there
Okay,
for a
okay.
walk, and then in the evening I could sneak an hour and then visit that place. Yeah. Jai
Nice.
Baba. Yeah.
Jai Baba.
Nice. Share some pics and Jai
Oh,
Baba.
sure. Do that. Yeah. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
Yeah. Jai Baba.
Karthik, we can return on 26th.